Hey guys, it's Allison Fleck with Bloom Culture, and in this tutorial we are going to be doing another approach for centerpiece design. So typically for centerpieces there's a holly chapel pillow. It comes in multiple sizes, but the smallest size is going to be a little bit too big for the vase that we're using today. So what I've decided to do, instead of using both of the sides of the pillow, I'm just going to use a half of the pillow. This is actually really great and can probably save you some money. Instead of having to buy one pillow for each of your centerpieces, you can buy one pillow for two. Another cool thing is if you do decide to go this route, you can always sell these to another DIY bride when you're done. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to tape a light X across the top of the pillow and make sure that it's secure to the vase. Give it a turn. Another quick X right here. Now that that's in place, you're going to want to fill your vase with water. The Holly Chapel pillow is a really great way to avoid using floral foam, and it's also a really wonderful eco-conscious option. Now I like to fill it to the tip top, but when you're transporting these, I'd pour a little bit out. I like to fill it to the tip top, that way I can use some shorter stems. Here's a great example of when I talk to you guys about breaking down stems. This is one stem of eucalyptus, and all of these offshoots are actually little pieces that I would use for a centerpiece or for a bouquet. So when I give you a recipe and I say a quarter of a bunch, sometimes just one stem can help make a bouquet or a centerpiece. So to break that down, I just snip along the stem, the longer shoots. Even if it's a smaller piece like this, I keep it and I can use these for boutonnieres, for bud vases, and for corsages. So hang on to everything. But I continue along the stem and just cut all these pieces off. So it's great to break this down because I didn't want you to feel like you had to tame this giant stem of a eucalyptus beast. So that's a really great spot to stop, and then you can clean up the stem a little bit by stripping down the leaves, giving it a snip, throwing away the stump, and you have some really great eucalyptus pieces. So to start with our centerpiece, I always start with greenery. So I like to clean up the stems a little bit, make sure that there aren't any leaves on that. One way to measure how long you'll want your stem is to hold it up against the vase. You'll probably have to trim it a little bit shorter to begin with, but it's a really great way to gauge how long your stem length is going to be. I start placing with, I'm going to sound like a broken record, with every single centerpiece, bouquet, arrangement, I always work in an X pattern. Just feel like it's a really easy approach, and it's kind of like if you lose your spot, or if you're not quite sure where to place something next, you can say like, oh, I know where to go. This is, an X pattern. It's not set in stone, it's just an approach, and you don't always place everything in an X. You do have to fill in the center, but it's just a good place to start. Already, this is working really well with holding my stems in place, and I don't really feel like things are moving around, especially with a low compote like this. Your stems can start to flop out, but this is doing a really wonderful job of keeping everything in place. Also, don't feel like you have to place all of one type of greenery at once. I like to go back and forth between varieties until I'm happy with it. And then also I like to save some for the end to fill in little holes and spots that I couldn't foresee that I was going to need to fill in later on. All right, I think that's a really great start, a really great foundation to our centerpiece. So now I'm going to move on to the flowers. Like with most of the designs that I teach, I like to start with my longer blooms first, or my more linear blooms. Stem length comes really natural to me, but again, if you need to measure it against your vase height, that's a great place to start. Also, sometimes compotes or vases with a shallow vase, you're gonna have to cut a little bit shorter, but always cut long at first, and you can always take some of that stem length off. really liking this holly chapel pillow. It is holding everything in place really well. It's almost like I'm using foam, but I'm not. Could also move my flowers closer to me. Okay, so now that I've got two of my longer blooms in, for some reason, I always like to move on to some of my spray roses. I like it because they have a different scale to them, and just as the name suggests, they have a bunch of little sprays on them. So these are really beautiful blooms to move on to next. Also, working in the X pattern, you also want to go back and forth between the front and the back. I teach with two different sides, so at times you're going to want to spin your bouquet to make sure that you can see both sides. I do this because typically arrangements are set on a round table and can be visible from all the way around. And this way, addressing two sides and then having the X pattern, it really makes a great shape, a really great organic shape, and tends to really address, you know, every single side that you're going to see. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some of my bigger blooms. I am going to move on to some of these really beautiful rust-colored roses. These are called Toffee Roses. They are absolutely gorgeous. One thing you're going to see me do on most of these roses is spin them. I like to do that because it really helps relax the petals and it makes the bloom open up really nicely. And don't worry if a few petals shoot off, that happens almost regularly. So this guy I'm probably going to tuck down in there a little bit. I like to create a lot of depth and a lot of movement in my arrangements. I don't like everything to be all on the same plane. Not saying that that's wrong, that's just how I prefer my arrangements to be. Also, as you're working within your arrangement, once you've got some of your floral placed, if you want to come back in and start filling in the middle and the base with some greenery, I like to do that too. I don't want you to feel like you have to fill every square inch of this with floral, only because it's just not realistic budget-wise. And you know, you want to have the variation between the floral and the greenery. To me, it's just really natural and organic feeling. I'm going to use some of these really gorgeous peach spray roses. I think that they are absolutely gorgeous. I am kind of channeling a different color palette here. Now, with most of our tutorials, it doesn't really matter if your color palette is similar or different to the one that we're using. The techniques and the approaches with the different types of flowers is always going to be the same. Now, before you place your spray roses, or any flower for that matter, specifically roses have guard petals on them, so they might look a little bruised, or as I like to say, chewy. Go ahead and trim those off or peel those off before you go ahead and place that in your arrangement. All right, now I'm going to start to place these really beautiful light purple or lavender roses. I think that they are absolutely stunning. They are a new variety that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will list it on the floral recipe for this specific design. Sometimes it might take a few tries to get your placement right. Sometimes other stems are in the way, sometimes the arrangement just doesn't accept the rose where you're wanting to place it, and that's okay. Just try again. You might have to cut your stem a little bit shorter or try a different placement, but I say just keep trying and you'll get it. Again, let's not forget to turn the arrangements. Yeah. Sometimes I like to keep the guard petals on because they have a really beautiful color variation. This one has kind of a gray variation to it, and I think it's really pretty. that that has been placed, I'm gonna spin my arrangement around again and just take a couple once-overs, make sure that there aren't any gaping holes. What I like to do next is move on to some of our more delicate flowers. This is called Tweedia. One thing when you are working with Tweedia, when you strip it down, it has a little bit of a milky stem to it. So I like to either strip it down with a towel or a paper towel to keep my hands clean, because it kind of gets a little sticky. Be a really pretty spot. And don't hesitate to stick things down in the middle. I say stick things, to place your floral down into the middle of the arrangement once you get to this point. This way you can start to add some of that variation, some scale change between the round rose and the small little wildflower that looks like the little Tweedia right here. Sometimes if it doesn't work, maybe the arrangement's telling you it doesn't want to go there. There we go. That's really beautiful. Okay, last but not least is what is called a filler flower. This is rice flower. I just think that this color is going to go perfectly with this arrangement. This has a really woody stem, but you want to make sure that you get all of these tiny little leaves off of the stem. So just pinch and clean it down and clean it off before you place it. Sometimes a little bit of your filler flower can go a really long way. And don't forget to play with depth with this too. You might tuck it into the arrangement a little bit more around the perimeter. Okay, I think that we are done. By finishing off, I would just pick it up and just spin it around and make sure that you've got everything covered, that you don't see any really big holes, and that, you know, most of all, that you're happy with it. But I think that this is looking really beautiful. Now's the time that if you do see any holes, you can go back in, like I was talking about, with your extra greenery and go in and fill some of those holes. Sometimes I like to add longer pieces here. So if you've got something like a ruscus that's really long, and you want to have some of that really pretty length added to the centerpiece, that's when I'll do this. Also, if you have any leftover blooms in your centerpiece, it looks like I've got a few here, you might just go back in and tuck it in where you see that it fits. You don't have to. You can always save that for maybe if you have like a bud vase, or if you want to use it somewhere else in your reception or in your bouquets. But if you have any left over in your recipe, now is the time to do that. And then give it a pretty good once over and make sure that you like the shape of the arrangement and how it's looking. And then I think you're done. All right, guys, I think we're done. I am so pleased with how everything turned out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below, or you can email us at hello@bloomcultureflowers.com. I am Allison with bloomcultureflowers.com, and we'll see you next time.